What's better, Parrot OS or Kali Linux?
Parrot OS.
But you would say that because you're a parrot.
I see my kitty.
What is that kitty doing on the table? Is it learning Parrot OS?
Yes, she wants to be a hacker too.
Hey everyone, it's David Bombal back again with Neal Bridges, really trying to extract as much knowledge out of Neal as we can during these calls. Neal, welcome.
Thank you as always, David. I'm glad to be back.
So Neal, let's hit this one running. Get this question a lot. What do you prefer? Do you prefer Kali or do you prefer Parrot OS, and why?
So if I had to break it down to the two, I'd say Kali. And again, I think there's no wrong answer. And I think that's the first thing that I would say is I don't think that there's a wrong answer in this book. But again, I go back to again, call me a boomer or old or whatever it is you want to call me, right? But I mean, you have to have the right tool for the right job.
Yeah.
But if you look at Kali and you look at Parrot, all they're really doing is they're taking all of these GitHub projects like Metasploit, like the Social Engineer Toolkit, like ReconNG, and they're just pulling them into a centralized distro. There's nothing stopping you from taking an Ubuntu distro, like fresh from the Ubuntu website, going to the Metasploit GitHub and installing Metasploit on an Ubuntu, the latest version of Ubuntu. And quite honestly, there's a number of penetration testers that I know, that I've come up with in the industry that prefer to do that, even to something like a Kali or a Parrot. And so there's no wrong answer. But I think when I say Kali, if your path eventually leads you to a cert like OSCP, Kali is going to be something that you want to be familiar with because it's something that you're going to use during OSCP anyway. I think you will eventually find yourself graduating out of Kali and either building your own Ubuntu distro that has the tools that you're awesome at, more so than having a reliance on the Kali distro. Me, myself, when I would do penetration testing, I carry with me 3 different VMs. I carry a Windows VM for all things Windows. For Cane Enable only runs on Windows. It won't work on the Wine version that's included inside of Kali. So I carry a Windows version for that. I carry Windows versions just in case I want to join a computer to a domain after I've hacked into it for any of the ADFS functions and things like that. PowerShell scripting and things like that. Although, Kali's added a lot of that capability into it. I carry an Ubuntu VM that has a lot of the GitHub scripts that I like to augment during my penetration test, or if I've made any modifications, say to my Metasploit my Metasploit distribution based on custom exploits that I've gotten that are out there that I've developed myself, then I'll take that Ubuntu VM that's developed, and then I'll take a Kali VM because it's super easy to hit power on a Kali VM and have over 300 tools at your disposal, inside of a Kali VM that are all ready to go. So I think it's about looking at Kali in the holistic sense of your toolbox. Know that there's no wrong answer. It truly is a preference, and that's why I choose Kali.
So, I mean, we're gonna talk about something else, but I'm gonna push in a few things now. We briefly mentioned this before. If you took one machine to go to do an attack, is it your Mac that you mentioned? I think before, is that right?
It is my Mac. I have a MacBook Pro. It's got 16 gigs of RAM, and I make that relevancy to say, like, I mentioned 3 VMs, right? And you want to be able to say, just on an off case, that you need to run all 3 VMs at the same time. That's a rough day if you're running all 3 of those VMs at the same time, but you have that option if you need to. You want to have a high RAM computer. It's not a requirement, but it's helpful, especially for some of the VMs that you could be running. If you're, you don't really want to be doing password cracking inside of a virtual machine. It is possible. And I would say that for some hashes that you would get for something like Responder, you could potentially put through John the Ripper on a VM. Your efficacy is going to drop significantly. I think you've done a video on this, specifically around password cracking. And that's why a lot of people have invested significantly in doing password crackers and shipping those passwords off. So how you use the VMs could vary greatly. But I think for most people who are coming up and learning, if you can run one VM, or if you've just got one computer and you're able to, we've talked about this during the last video, Dave. We talked about thinking outside the box, right?
Yeah.
I do the unpopular opinion thing on Windows. If all you have is a Windows 10 laptop,
I'm glad you're going to mention that. I was just taking notes now. What laptop should I buy?
But I mean, I think you've done a video on this as well, and I hope people took that video to heart. But it's WSL, it's Windows Subsystem for Linux.
Right,
yeah, and I don't think people realize just how brilliant it was for Microsoft to put WSL into Windows 10. And I tell people frequently, it's like, oh, look, if you've got a Windows 10 laptop, use WSL and put Ubuntu on there, put Kali on there in WSL, and you can achieve objectives without needing to necessarily run VirtualBox or VMware or anything like that to get a VM on there.
Yeah, I mean, it's so let me I want to push you on this, Neal. A lot of guys, I've had this in a lot of videos, it's hilarious. Guys say, you're not a hacker because you're not running Kali natively. What's your point on that? Like, would you recommend someone install Kali on bare metal, or would you tell them to put it in a VM?
I mean, I think you and I had an episode on how do you handle haters, and I hear people say things like that, and I'm like, wow, that's what you're going to choose to knock people about. No, do you need to run Kali on bare metal? Look, I think I've built a number of drop boxes in my time. I've built a number of specialized laptops because of sensitive penetration tests. And sure, you can put a penetration testing distro on bare metal. I think if you're putting Kali on bare metal, and then you're trying to take that laptop with you to do work every day, like check your email and, write penetration testing reports, and, you're trying to make that also your day-to-day laptop. I don't think you really have a concept of what it is you're trying to do with that laptop other than just look cool that you're using Kali on a day-to-day basis. Because to use Kali day-to-day, for checking your email, writing your penetration testing reports, doing your research and things like that, it is not equipped to do that whatsoever. It's not a distro that we use like Windows or OS X and things like that. And I think people who try to make it that are really just people who want to say, yeah, I've got a laptop that's got like hacking stuff on it. It's got Kali, which is, the hacking distro. And so therefore I can open up this laptop and hack your network today. And that's just not reality.
I mean, the lines between physical and virtual are getting so blurred because, I mean, with WSL, with VMware, with nested virtualization, I mean, the performance, I saw the Microsoft guys talking about the performance between WSL versus bare metal. And, I mean, you're definitely losing, but it's not that much. And, I mean, to your point, if you're going to be doing GPU password cracking, you're probably going to put that on a Windows rig or something where you can really make use of the GPUs. That's not the laptop that you're going to be carrying around. So it's just coming full circle now. You would use a Mac, or would you recommend Windows with VMs? So if someone was starting out, because I get this question a lot, David, what laptop should I buy? What would you recommend, Neal? I mean, we could start with like a low-end laptop, medium, if you've got a lot of money, or you can just give me like kind of things to think about if buying a laptop.
Well, and I'm glad you went into the money realm, because I think the money thing plays a huge role in it, right? And I think if you're in a financially strapped situation, I think whatever you can get your hands on, you can turn into a laptop that you can help you on your ethical hacking career, right? Because you got to remember, you can put Kali or Ubuntu for that matter, or any other Linux distro on a USB thumb drive, right? Yeah. And you can run it from a USB thumb drive and boot it from there. So I think if you're in a financially strapped situation, you could get away with running some of these very lightweight surfaces that Microsoft puts out. I wouldn't recommend going it so far as to get to doing a Chromebook, because I think a Chromebook's a little too stripped down to do it. I don't know if I've actually ever seen anybody use a Chromebook for Kali or anything like that. But I think if you were to look at some of these cheaper surfaces, that's a good place to start. If you're a little strapped for cash, I think when you look at the finances of buying a laptop, I think I would look at prioritizing RAM and hard drive space over CPU, right?
That's interesting.
Well, because RAM's going to help you with the number of virtual machines you could run. And to your point, right, there is loss between WSL and virtual machines. I don't want to gloss over that. But again, tools fit, form, and function. Do you necessarily need 100% efficacy between WSL and a virtual machine, right? What are you hoping to accomplish, between that computing loss between those two? If you're just trying to get familiar, right, with Kali Linux, then maybe you just need one Kali VM that's got 1 gig of RAM, and so a 4 GB laptop is probably good enough for you, which is pretty easy to get off the shelf for a few $100s, right? But as you grow up in the industry and as you get your first job, as you start to pull in some money, doing ethical hacking, I would definitely look to invest in yourself. My preference and what I recommend people is I recommend a MacBook. You can do, that to me would be like the finish line, right? Or the star that you shoot for. Because again, remember, MacBook OS X is BSD based, which is effectively Linux. They've done a great job with technologies like Homebrew that allow you to install, the same stuff that you could install from VM onto your Mac natively. You can actually do a Metasploit installation and Ruby installation via Homebrew, natively on your Mac. So you can effectively have Metasploit running on bare metal on your MacBook Pro. And then just the flexibility that you have inside of that operating system to be able to do almost anything you can do in Linux is hands down the best. And then also it's obviously got the power to support, multiple VMs and things like that make it, make it powerful.
It's interesting. I saw an article, the guy who created Ruby on Rails, he tried to, a while ago, move to Windows from a Mac. And he tried all kinds of things and it was a disaster. But that was before WSL. And I think WSL has changed the game significantly because now you can run Linux basically in this lightweight VM on your Windows computer. Okay, so just to summarize, if you had to choose, you would get like a Windows laptop if you were starting out perhaps, and then just run stuff in VMs. I mean, VMware Workstation Player is free, or VirtualBox is free, so you could use one of those to virtualize it or use WSL. I must say WSL, I find that it struggles with networking. So if you want networking stuff, I personally prefer a VM at the moment. But then the ultimate finish line you're saying is to get a Mac, just because of the operating system is so close to Linux, and it's a good piece of hardware. Is that right?
Absolutely. And again, you have to think about what you're doing as an ethical hacker, right? When you're an ethical hacker for a career perspective, you're not just pen testing day in and day out, right? You have to write reports. You have to check your email. You've got to work on, statements of work, whether you like it or not, you're in that business pipeline where you got to do that. And so you have to think about those integrations with business technologies, with Active Directory, with Microsoft Office and things like that. And, a Linux-based operating system like Ubuntu, yeah, they've got a ton of great features, but you're not going to get, Microsoft Word for Ubuntu. You're going to get LibreOffice, and there's stuff that's lost in translation to go from Office to Libre and from Libre back to Office. And so you have to think about it holistically. Again, for those of you who want to make a career in ethical hacking, right, that laptop is the laptop that you're going to go to war with when you go to a customer site, and then you're going to come back and you're going to write your reports on it. And so think about it from that perspective. Do you want to have two laptops, right? Or do you just want to keep everything inside of a VM, keep it contained, and have a singular machine that allows you to accomplish the mission and do your job at the same time?
I mean, the great thing about a VM is you can snapshot it. So if you screw it up or you have a problem, you just restore from snapshot. It's quite difficult to do with a physical PC. I mean, obviously you can restore stuff, but it's not as easy.
Well, and if you real quick on that same topic though, because if you look at it, and again, I get back to the practical side of ethical hacking from a career perspective. If you're working with a client and let's say that they do have, you do gain access to personal health information or personally identifiable information, things that are protected under GDPR, it makes it a lot easier for you to give the client a sense of data security, to say that all of your data is held inside of this VM. You mentioned VirtualBox and VMware that both support encrypting the VM in addition to Kali and Ubuntu having encryption that you can do from an LVM perspective when you go to stand up the VM. Excuse me. And so you can provide your client a sense of data security inside of that VM that might be otherwise hard to do if you're trying to put it on bare metal and having to reload it every single time or something like that.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I wanted to ask you this, Neal, before I forget. Let's say I'm an ethical hacker. I'm on the red team. How much of my time is actually breaking in relation to everything else I do? Because you spoke about, you have to do SOWs, perhaps you have to do all kinds of things. And I mean, obviously this will vary a lot, but can you give us an indication? Is it like 50% of my time, 90% of my time? I just think we need to put this in perspective, because people focus very heavily on the hacking hardcore skills, and then they forget about like writing reports and all the other stuff that goes with it.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. And again, mileage may vary, and it varies based on company. It varies based on, your role in the organization and things like that. And so I'm going to speak very, broadly about a couple different levels, right? But generally speaking, the two biggest things that you have to do as a penetration tester, as an ethical hacker or a red teamer, is you have to hack, and then you have to write reports. This is why we talk very heavily on focusing on soft skills, focusing on the writing part of it. You are a useless pen tester, and I'll say this at the risk of unpopular opinion. You are a useless pen tester if you write a shitty report.
Yeah.
I mean,
what does it help the customer? What does it help the customer if you write rubbish?
You don't have any value to customers if you can't write a report. And so, if you want to be the best ethical hacker in the world, and you want to go out there and learn how to write 0 days, and you want to go and you want to have like, OSCP and AWE and all these other, certs that OffSec puts out, or you want to go get PTP and PTX from INE, and you want to go get all these awesome certs, that's all well and good. But if you can't write a report that helps your client protect their environment, you have failed as a penetration tester. And so I think those two things, those should be the sharpest tools in your toolkit, is that. Now, this is where, again, mileage may vary. If you're, depending on what your involvement is with the sales team, depending on the company that you're at, let's say that you're at a consulting company like a Big Four, or you're at a consulting company like Accenture or something like that, and you're actively involved in the pre-sales process, and, you may be helping with scoping. And so you may be sitting in on pre-sales calls that, you're listening to a client explain to you how big their network is, or how many nodes that they've got, or, all these other things that kind of go into helping your sales team determine the scope of a penetration test. And then you may be having those post-call conversations with the sales team that says, well, we could do this really huge pen test for $100,000, or we can do this really small test for $50,000. And then you're having that conversation internally. And this is something that I don't think people realize, if you're on that consulting side, you're having that conversation internally because you as a penetration tester are like, I want to do the biggest, baddest, most awesomest pen test that I can do, but it's going to cost the client a ridiculous amount of money, and it may not be the right pen test for them. Yeah. And so you're having to practice those soft skills in terms of helping the organization narrow down and scope the pen test that matters for the client. And so you're going to spend a portion of your time doing that. You may spend a portion of your time helping the marketing team explain to them what ethical hacking is and penetration testing is and red team is, to put into a slide deck so they can, make it better for the marketing folks. If you're in a corporate environment, like you're working for a company and you're a penetration tester for the company, your days may consist doing more hacking than some of the other stuff I mentioned, since you don't necessarily have to do the sales stuff. But, your reports become equally more important because everybody is relying on you, and there's so much focus on you inside of that organization. And then you're continuously contending with the inner office politics. And this is, again, let's break down barriers and let's demystify like how awesome people think ethical hacking is inside of a company. You can't just wake up on what's today, Wednesday, that we're doing this. You just can't wake up on Wednesday and be like, I'm going to phish the CEO, or I'm going to spoof the CEO's email address and phish the entire company. Like, that just doesn't happen in most of these Fortune 100 companies. Even in most Fortune 500 companies, you're not doing that. You're not just waking up and being like, well, we've got a new zero login, exploit that's out today. I'm gonna run it against the domain controllers. Oh, it's the end of the month, and you bring down a domain controller that's connected to SAP at the end of the month that's trying to do month-end billing. You will lose your job over that. Exactly. Like, you will lose. And so you have to contend with, the inner office politics that comes with telling the organization that you're going to conduct a penetration test. and literally getting everybody's buy-in from the network technician all the way up to the CISO, the CFO in some cases, in terms of doing that. And so it's not day in and day out hands-on keyboard hacking there. And this is why we harp so hard on soft skills.
So, I mean, like, let's say you're working for a big four consultancy firm. Is it like half your time is actual pen testing? Or, I mean, I know it's really rough to pinpoint this, but I'm trying to just get a feel for why you keep talking about like soft skills being so important.
I think half is at best.
At best, okay.
At best, because and especially at a big four, because at a big four they don't have a sales team, and I don't know, again, people who have not experienced a big four, that was my big shocker when I went to a big four, is that there isn't a sales organization inside of a big four, regardless of the level that you're at, whether you're an associate level up to a managing director level, right? You're selling, something at some level inside of a big four, and that you're part of that responsibility. And so, you're working on requests for proposals, you're working on scoping exercises, you're working on marketing material, you're working with other people inside of a big four to do that sales process. And that's why I think, and then you get on an engagement, and that's awesome, and you're excited. But you have to remember, in most of these cases, a pen test engagement is a point in time engagement, and it's going to last for, 3, 4, 6, 8 weeks, at best. You're going to do the penetration test and you're going to be done. And so, yeah, for those 8 weeks, you may be 40 hours a week plus doing that penetration test, and it's going to feel like it's full time. But then if you don't have another penetration test lined up after that, for some reason, whatever the case is, you're now back to the other things that are associated with trying to bring business into a big four. A dedicated penetration tester for a big four doesn't necessarily assume that when you finish one pen test engagement, you're going to roll right next to the next pen test engagement, all the way throughout the year.
I mean, that's really important I'm glad you've mentioned that. So, if you look, you said your top skills were like, you have to have the technical skills. And then the second one was you have to be able to write or write reports. So Neal, practical as always, how do I learn to write reports? Are there templates? How do I get information to know what a report looks like?
So I want to answer that in two different ways, right? And so in true Neal fashion, the first one, right, which is how do I learn how to write? You write stuff. Yeah. LinkedIn, and I know we're going to do a completely separate topic on LinkedIn, but LinkedIn gives you a fantastic platform to practice writing. It's called posting content. It's called writing articles. And people talk about like starting their own blog up, right? That's how you practice writing. You're going to get real-time feedback. If your writing sucks, if your analysis sucks, if somebody finds a flaw, you're going to get that real-time feedback, and that's going to help you be a better writer. And so I think to learn how to write, you need to start writing things. And so I always point people to LinkedIn and have them just start writing stuff on LinkedIn. Whatever your passion is, just pick up an article and write it. So we'll go back to our 1,000 connection challenge that we did during the first video, David. Yep. And I'll say that if you're an ethical hacker, regardless of where you're at in the industry, we've got 4 quarters. We're coming to the end of the first month of the first quarter. You should have 4 articles. If you're an ethical hacker, you should have 4 articles. That's 1 a quarter. That's crazy easy to do, about something ethically hacking related every quarter. And I'll make it easy for you, right? There's 3 things that should be in your mind when you write any piece, whether it's corporate America, whether it's a pen test report, whether it's an incident response report. 3 easy segments. What? So what? Now what? And so 4 articles. That's all you got to do this year. Just 4 little easy articles on something ethically hacking related that covers what, so what, now what. And if you can do that, you have built your foundation about how to write. And I would just say, keep doing that. Keep learning from the critiques that you get about it. Ask people to view it. Ask people to give you advice and critiques on it, and keep growing in that segment. Now, to your other part, in terms of pen test templates, These are harder to come by because obviously a pen test report gives you a blueprint on how to hack into a company. And not a lot of companies are interested in releasing those types of blueprints on how they got their company owned. And so you have to dig a little deeper to find penetration testing reports. And there isn't really a standard as to how a report should be written. Lord knows, I tried to create a template, when I first got out of the military in 2013. And that template has probably changed 24 times, in the last 7 years. And it changes based on company you go to, based on pen test type that you perform and the deliverables that you want to do. And so, pen testing templates are hard. What I would say is I would almost go look at breach reports. So like go find a Mandiant breach report, go find some of these breach reports from stuff that's happened and look at how they go through the kill chain, or they go through the attack narrative, right? For a breach. I encourage people to write pen test reports like that. I've seen too many pen test reports where somebody does a Nessus scan and puts like 400 pages of Nessus results into a pen test report. And when I see that, I had a massive telecom company. I'm not going to say which one.
No, don't.
But I had a massive telecom company that had sold me a penetration test when I was working for one of the Fortune 100 companies. And I opened up the report when I first got it, and it was 200 pages of vulnerability scan results. I literally closed the document, called up the account executive, and ripped them a new one for giving me a vulnerability report as a penetration test. and so I would encourage folks to think about breach reports, how they talk through walking through the kill chain. And I encourage people to think about their pen testing report writing in that same fashion.
Okay, but practically, how do I find those? Where do I go? Have you got websites or books or stuff that I can look at?
I would start with Mandiant. Mandiant's a good resource because they publish a lot of those. I say Kaspersky, Secure List. Let me just make sure I'm spelling that one right. Secure List. I'll send this one to you so you've got this one. Secure List is Kaspersky's kind of threat research-ish type center, and they've got a ton of bulletins and a ton of breach reports and things like that. I think organizations like Mandy, I think organizations like Kaspersky, they've done a really good job of trying to paint the picture of some of these large malware campaigns and some of these breach reports that they've investigated. Krebs, even though he's not traditionally security and he's got a crazy ego, I think his writing style helps you visualize the attack path pretty well. And so I even recommend going to read how Krebs writes up some of his attack narratives. And that's what I would get people to focus in on, is writing a report that walks a business person through how their organization got hacked.
That's great advice. I'll get the links from you, Neal, and put them below this video for people who, want to find them.
Absolutely.
Anything else you want to say, Neal? Because this is getting long again. I want to talk about another topic in a separate video. So just going back again to summarize, you prefer Kali over Parrot OS at the moment. Your preferred hardware is a MacBook, but Windows is fine.
Absolutely.
You wouldn't recommend running Kali natively unless you had multiple laptops, because you're going to spend a lot of your time writing reports, things like that. Anything I've missed, just to summarize?
No, I think you captured it all. And, I just keep reminding everybody just to keep learning and keep pushing their skills to the limit.
That's brilliant. Neal, thanks so much. Good to talk again.
Absolutely, David.